have a question for you guys. By show of hands, how many of you, again, not related to anything, how many of you guys think Nightmare Before Christmas is a Halloween movie? And how many of you think that Nightmare Before Christmas is a Christmas movie? And how many of you don't care because Nightmare Before Christmas is awesome? With no further ado, please help me welcome our guests at this time, Chris Sarandon and Ken Page.
Hello.
Hi. How are you guys?
Good morning, good morning.
Good morning, good morning.
Welcome to Austin. How have these, so you were here yesterday, how have these fine folks of Austin been treating you?
Oh, the best. Although you're not all from Austin, are you?
No, the majority aren't, right?
Most of you are not.
San
right?
Antonio? No.
Dallas?
Oh, two, okay. Houston.
Houston.
Cool.
Out of Houston.
Louisiana, I heard, yeah. Oklahoma.
Is this your first time here in Austin?
Not my first time, no. I've been here for a few different kinds of things. Not a Comic-Con, but I've been here for other things. I love Austin. Austin's great, but you don't care because you're not from Austin.
Same here.
No, there you go.
I've been here several times too, and it's a great town.
So before you guys came out, I ran a random poll, not concerning any particular projects, but I have to know actually, since Halloween season now starts in August, seemingly. Do you guys have a favorite Halloween movie that you always visit every year?
Gee, I don't know. What movie would that be? Well, Nightmare Before Christmas, of course, right? And of course, Chris knows he's so tired of hearing me say this, but my other favorite movie anyway, but also at Halloween, is The Exorcist. Ooh. You're going to see the new one, right? There's a Believers coming out. I think.
That's right.
Yeah, it was October. I'm doing an ad for them. It was October 13th, Friday the 13th, but they moved it back because of Taylor Swift's concert is coming out on the 13th. So they moved it back to the 6th, October 6th.
Really, isn't it interesting how much of a cultural phenomenon she is? Yeah. It's just extraordinary. Yeah. Favorite Halloween movie? Not necessarily a Halloween movie. When I was a kid, I loved Halloween, of course. But then when I was a grown-up and I was an actor, my children were always terribly disappointed in me because I didn't want to dress up. And they kept asking me, Daddy, why don't you want to dress up? And I said, because I dress up for a living. So, it's not like I need to play roles. And I think it's one of the things that makes Halloween so special is because it gives you guys, who are not in our business, a chance to kind of express that, who else can I be, right? And it's fun. It's fun for you. Not terribly fun for me.
You feel like you're going to work, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
You got to put on a costume.
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned now that you're grown. I want to go back before you were grown, before you were involved, before people heard you or saw you on television or the big screen. Both of you were involved in theater, whether it be regional theater, improv, Broadway. How important do you feel that was to your professional growth?
Oh.
Yeah, very important.
Yeah.
It is still. I mean, you keep growing, hopefully, right? But yeah, for me, I started out when I was a kid doing some versions of theater and so on and so forth. And I can't say there's anything that I've done that isn't rooted in theater. I do cabaret and concerts, blah, blah, blah. But it all comes down to the elements that make theater, which is knowing who you are up there and what you are out there and so forth. So for me, it's the ground zero of everything. Definitely.
Yeah. And it's essentially how I started as well. I started out in graduate school doing plays, undergrad too, but in graduate school. And then regional theater, I was on tour for a while. I've done Broadway. Ken's done Broadway. We've both been involved in theater all our lives and continue to be if we can.
Yeah.
It's something that remains the kind of root of what we do.
That's great. I talk to a lot of people, and they say that route continues to be stage, and their advice for folks looking to get into the industry is theater. Do you guys have any advice for young folks, old folks looking to get into the entertainment industry?
Well, first I would, I don't want to get too deep on you, but I would differentiate between the theater and the entertainment industry, because getting into the industry is a lot of things that are just purely technical, and where you are, who you know, what you do, who you do it with, and all those sorts of things. But the theater is something you can start yourself by educating yourself, my opinion. You can read, you can listen. I remember as an 8, 9-year-old going to the public library in St. Louis, my hometown, and going into the St. Louis? Yes. Okay. Long live the Delmar Loop. Okay. Anyway, going to the library downtown, St. Louis Library, and going into the section where they had Broadway cast albums. And I would go there and I would take out 2 or 3 at a time. And this lady was so kind. She first looked at me like, "Why are you taking these things?" And then she started saving them for me. She'd say, "I have a new Broadway cast album. Would you like to take it out today?" And I'd say, "Yes, ma'am." But I started educating myself. So when I got to New York, interestingly, I found that I knew all this stuff because I had been educating myself for years. So I think that's a way you can start yourself in the theater, i.e. the movies, TV, blah, blah. As far as the industry, I think that fluctuates as the years go by, how you do that, and it's changed a lot. So you're on. I'll let you go.
Well, the first word I give of advice to anybody who wants to go into acting is don't. It requires a very thick skin because you are constantly confronted with rejection. Of the jobs that we've probably gone up for in our lives, where we've auditioned for, maybe you get 1 out of 10, maybe 1 out of 20,
1 out of 20.
Depending, Yeah. It doesn't matter if you're, there are very few people in the world who work from job to job constantly all the time. I tell this story constantly. One of my daughters, when she was about 5 or 6 years old, was sitting and having pizza with a friend of hers and the friend's mom. And the friend mom, they were talking about, what their daddies do and their mommies do. And she said, "And you know what your daddy does to her own daughter?" And the little girl said, "Yeah, daddy makes wires in houses." She said, "That's right. Daddy's an electrician." And she turned to my daughter and she said, "You know what your daddy does, don't you?" And my daughter, Alexa, said, "Yeah, he looks for work." Because that was her experience of me. I was home a lot, on the phone with my agent, saying, "Okay, when am I going in for an audition? So it's a profession of constant rejection. So you have to be prepared for that. And also, I think, as Ken says, you have to educate yourself in some way, as you do in any field of endeavor, what you're going into. And part of the education is not only observing life, but also educating yourself about life and about lots of different ways that people live, because you're going to be reflecting the society around you. So you can't just have a narrow point of view of, "Oh, I only want to play this kind of character." You have to think in terms of, what's the range of human experience, and I have to expose myself to that. And if you can do that, then, and also have a thick skin and be prepared for it, and maybe have a little money in the bank as well, then sure, why not?
What initially drew you to acting in the first place? I mean, and have you known about some of those hardships, would you have still pursued?
Well, what drew me to, I don't even know if I could describe what drew me to it. I think it was something that came from inside me than something that came toward me, if you will. I just had a propensity towards it or whatever, I don't know. Even as a kid, you think about children playing with their toys and things, and they're doing all the character voices, and they're playing with the cars going, "I don't know, do you want to go to the thing?" "Yes, let's go to the railroad." That's a form of, most people grow out of it.
Exactly.
We don't. We keep doing it. But I forgot the part of your question was.
Well, the second part was, have you known about some of the hardships? Would you have still pursued? Yeah.
I don't think I could have not done it.
Right.
And I think that's something Chris said. If you don't have, that's what the first advice I got. I was already in a professional job, but I was beginning. And this wonderful lady, I went up to her, and she was a seasoned professional, and I said to her, I want to go to New York. And she said, why? And I said, well, because I have to. And she said, that's the only reason to do it. She said, because you have to. If you have any other option, like Chris said, don't. Yeah. Because it is not easy. But your love of it and your passion for it is what makes it easier for you, because you're driven by something that doesn't let you not do it.
Exactly.
You know? But if you don't have that, it's tough. And I've had friends who liked it or wanted the glitter, they wanted all the inclusion that it gives you and so forth, and they fell out of the business because they didn't have the stuff, as they say, that makes you stay in it and want to do it. You know, it's why someone like Betty Davis did it until she was ancient. I mean, really, she was like, Betty, stop, you know. But I don't, you know, as my friend said, lay down, you died 2 years ago, you just didn't know. But, yeah, you know, but it was so wonderful because the passion, it proved that she was indeed who she always said she was. She was driven by her want to do it, her passion for it, all the way to the end. So I think that's the core, you know.
Yeah, and also, I think things have changed to a certain extent from when I first got into it, because at the time that I started, it was about building a career. It was about having a lifetime of work doing this thing that we do, rather than it's being about being a celebrity or being famous. And if it's about being a celebrity and being famous, then you're in a different kind of business. You're in the entertainment business, I guess, and you are providing. It's interesting. I had a conversation. I do a podcast, and I had a conversation with a guy by the name of Mike Flanagan, who's a director. And we were talking. You know, Mike Flanagan, wonderful director, and he was saying that because his company is called Intrepid Pictures, it's not called Intrepid Films. Yeah. And I said, why? Because in the old days in Hollywood, when directors were working on movies and actors were working on movies, they were working on movies. They were working on moving pictures, not films, quote unquote. And he was saying that now they're not called even films; it's called content.
Oh God, I never heard that.
Yeah, it's called content, and so what's happened is it's moved from the realm of art into the realm of commerce almost entirely. I'm kind of circling around this because essentially my answer to the question is that it has to be a calling, which is what Ken essentially was saying. It's something that you have to do. You don't really have any choice. Some of you may be lucky enough in this audience to be doing things that you were compelled to do for the rest of your life, and you're blessed if that's the case. And this is one of the things you have to do because you have to do it.
Yeah.
Ken, now you were on the original Broadway cast of Cats. Did you foresee the future, the success of what Cats became?
No, because a lot of people were like, Cats, bleh, you know. No, I didn't really. Well, I'll take that back. I'll say because the show had already been done in London, and it was a big hit there, and it was, bona fide hit. And when they were bringing it to New York, it was already with this regalia about it being a hit in London. So it had a predestination, so to speak. But there were still questions when it was done originally if it was going to work in America, because it's even though T.S. Eliot, on whom his poems the show was based on, is American, he spent a lot of time in London and England and so forth. So the show had a very British thrust to it, and they weren't sure if that was going to fly in America. And they did change some things to make it more American. But I remember when the show opened, our director, Trevor Nunn, said to us, because we were all hearing all the talk around, Cats could be a big flop in the States, we don't know. And he came to us and he said, the show has I think it was a $4 million advance. He said, we're going to run, So that took a lot of pressure off, because then it became an expression of your art. It became do the thing we're doing, tell the story we're doing. We don't care if people don't get it necessarily. We're doing an artistic expression of something that turned out to be a huge commercial success. But it was a very special, and I found out later, rare thing to go into a Broadway show with it really being an artistic endeavor. The business part was sort of over there because it was already sold, so we were able to just concentrate on the actual art and work of it, you know. But did we know? Absolutely not. Up until that point. And even then, you know, because still there's public opinion, and there still is. Somebody came up to me only 2 days ago and said, I know most people really hate Cats, but I think it's just the best show ever.
What a wonderful way to compliment you.
Hello. And I said, well, thanks so much, you know. But something else I tell people, and it sounds just a little bit snarky, but I say Cats has been done in like 12 languages all over the world. It's still on tour. And we did a filmed stage version of it back in, I think, 97. Not the film. 98, thank you. All right. 98, not the film. A filmed stage version of it. And so it keeps going and is there like Nightmare Before Christmas. Who knew, you know? Yeah. But it does keep going because it has a universal message and voice to people, and I think it'll always be there.
And this sort of speaks in many ways to Nightmare as well. Because when we made Nightmare, I don't think any of us had, I mean, we knew that it was an extraordinary work of art. Right. The stop motion animation that they were doing, when we got to see it, you know, a little bit early on. I remember very vividly when my kids were really young, I was in LA working on something else, and they sent me a VHS of a black and white VHS with the time code going across the bottom, because I was going to be going into the studio with Tim Burton and working on some of the line readings that Henry Selick and I had agreed on earlier, but that Tim wanted to change a little bit of, and there were some things that I wanted to work on too. So we went into the studio and worked on it. So they sent me this VHS, and they said, well, take some notes, and when you go to the studio, then you can tell Tim, can we work on this particular thing? Is it okay with you? So I put it in the machine, and my kids were in another room doing something else. And it started, the VHS started, I'm sitting there with my pad, and suddenly I realized maybe it's 5 or 10 minutes into this black and white, right, on the screen with this thing going across the bottom, suddenly there are 3 kids. You know, I think they were at the time maybe 8, 6, and 3.5 or something like that, right? And they're like this. Because it was so unique. So I think we knew that going in, but I don't think we knew that it was going to have this kind of life and this kind of extraordinary sort of following. Yeah. And part of that is, I think, a tribute to the fact that it's something that people have watched when they were kids now, because it's generation later, and also now they're watching it with their kids. And it becomes a
generation.
Yeah, generational thing. Same thing with The Princess Bride. Same thing. You know, at first it was not a big hit, and then people discovered it on VHS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, talking a little bit, going a little bit more on that, you know, you're watching that black and white video. How do the both of you approach bringing an animated character to life as opposed to stage or on screen?
I think for me it worked particularly because it was very close to stage, because it was
very theatrical.
You know, very theatrical. And the thing I remember being aware of, because it was the first voice work that I had done in a long form, whatever, and it was the idea that everything that the character is, there is, for me, the actor, there's no physical. So it all has to go into the voice. And then as the process, they animate to what's in your voice, rather than maybe the other way around. So it was an idea, once I caught on to what the task was, to really go in and make all these colors be part of your voice and use the nuances of playing your voice like an instrument. and then making all of those kind of, and really going for it, because in that world, that's the thing. You may not do that on stage. You may be a little more directive about how you approach. But for me, it was like, you mean I really get to just go crazy? And it was kind of like, yeah, please do, because then we will choose of that what applies to what we need. But we need to have as many choices as possible. So it was a really amazing thing to get to do that as an actor. The difference for me, having done a couple of things since, is that it's a world that exists almost purely in your imagination until it's physicalized or visualized, and you have to give it everything, and then that's what allows the animators or the illustrators to make it come to life visually, is what you put into the voice.
Yeah, because almost always, I don't know of an instance where this is not the case, that you do the voice first, and then the animators come in and create the visuals. Now, the visuals are laid out in sort of broad form in the beginning, but the animators depend a lot on what you do and how you express yourself in order to create the character. And there's something also, interestingly, improvisational about it, because you are given, sometimes you're given very specific directions of, no, hit this word, don't hit that word, which actors hate, because it's supposedly taking away from our creativity. But at the same time, you're fulfilling somebody else's vision that's already sort of prescribed. It's out there. The storyboards are there, the visuals are there. But within that, you're given often a lot of latitude when you're recording with the director, where the director will say, okay, now just do 5 any way you want to do them. Just give me 5 screams. Yeah. Just give me 5 no's. Give me 5 of these or 10 of that. And so you can just kind of go, what the hell? Yeah, all right. I can do whatever I want. And so it's quite creative in that regard, even though you have these other constraints.
Right. I think it was fascinating to me how, given you could do 5 no's or something, and then they had this genius, I called it, of taking all of that and I don't know what the right word for it really is, but deciding which of those out of 5 takes times this, times that, and making it sound as though you had done it all in one room talking to each other, which I never worked with anybody. So that, to me, is the miracle of their part of it. It made me really become aware of that thing, and that doesn't exist really in any other form.
Yeah.
That they, while you're being creative and spontaneous and so forth, they are in their mind thinking already how to make a narrative script out of all of those choices. I don't know how they do it, frankly. I still don't know how. But they do it, and then you sit down and we sit down and we watch the movie, and it's like, wow, I did that 12 times, and that's the one they picked. And you don't really know what your performance is, in essence, because it's like the editor in a film anyway.
Yeah, right.
You don't know. The editor is all, because they can make you look really great, and it's the same in voiceover, or not be there, literally. We know people, and maybe ourselves, who have done films, and you go see the movie and you're not in it anymore. You're like, where's my scene? Gone, And that was sort of one of the things, like I said, that I discovered in seeing the finished product. There were takes that I'd done that I'd forgotten about.
Yeah, me too.
That they incorporated, and I went, wow, I would have never thought they would have used that necessarily. But it is the performance now that exists. So I give them at least a third. A third of the credit, because it isn't what I did, it's what they did with what I did,
And what's also been interesting for me is that I get called on to go back in and do stuff for Jack again. And, we did this movie back in the 90s. Yeah. And it's been a while, and I'm a little older, I think. And it's such an interesting experience to come back in and sit down, and after, and usually what happens is a couple of times I'll do a couple of takes and the director will say, can you just... Can I play some Jack for you? because somehow I didn't sort of slip right into the character. And then once that happens and I see it and I go, oh, yeah, oh, hi, Jack, how are you? Okay, yeah. I'm here, we're going to go. And then it works great. It's fun.
So I have a question for some of you out there. Who here has been to Disneyland and been on Haunted Mansion Holiday? Have you guys? I'm assuming they've taken you out there to see Haunted Mansion Holiday, and that's again using Nightmare Before Christmas on top of the Haunted Mansion. What were your thoughts the first time you saw what they did with that?
Well, again, we'd done recording for it,
yeah.
But you don't know what they're going to do with it, So you get on the ride, and I was going in the ride, and I heard this voice say, "Welcome, come in," and I thought, "Oh, that's me." Honestly, I was disassociated because I'm like looking around. This is the Haunted Mansion ride, and I completely forgot that whenever I would hear something from Oogie, that it was me. It was completely, And they have a thing there now. They have the Oogie Boogie Bash. Has anybody seen?
I'm going.
You're going?
Yes, in 2 weeks, yes.
In 2 weeks, okay. Well, I got to go to that a few years ago, and I had done recording stuff for it. But again, the miracle of it wasn't what I had recorded, it's what they'd done with it.
Right.
And it really blew me away. They had done a whole thing that was way past anything I imagined, So we get to keep living. I mean, it's pretty extraordinary that we get to keep doing these things in new ways and continual, so forth, because a lot of people, they might have done something X amount of years ago, but it's just that. We get to keep living and creating in these characters, which is pretty rare.
Yeah, I don't think there's a non-disclosure about this, but I just finished doing two things. One for a new video game, and one for a stage show they're doing in LA at a theater, where there's like a Jack puppet that's like 8 or 9, 10 feet tall, something like that, and there are human characters interacting with it or something.
I've seen that, by the way.
You kidding?
No, I've seen the puppet.
Oh yeah, I've seen the puppet. No, the puppet's very cool, bizarre.
Sorry.
But at any rate, so we do get to keep visiting, and it's always great. It's always great. I love it.
I think Jack's the main character at the fireworks show at Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party in Orlando. So, as you said, it continues to
if
live
you
on.
say so, I believe it.
Ken, I want to bring up one thing and to lead into something, but you got to perform Damn Yankees with the one and only Dick Van Dyke.
Yes.
How was that? Like, what was the first, when you first saw him, were you like, oh, I'm just going to go on stage with Dick Van Dyke here? Like, what were your thoughts?
No, I was thrilled. I mean, we all love Dick Van Dyke, I mean, he's such an icon, and this was a few years ago, and he was then, still. And for me, I remember thinking that forever I would have this in my memory. Because I'd watched the Dick Van Dyke Show, like we all did at some point, even reruns or whatever. So he was Dick Van Dyke, But all of a sudden, he was Dick Van Dyke, was standing right there. And it was amazing. And I can tell you, he's one of the sweetest people I've ever met. Kind. I always tell this story to some people about how they had somebody who was clever. They had chorus water for the chorus, and they had principal water. Water divided up for chorus and principals. And Dick came in and he said, "Why, that's chorus water." And he did like 20 minutes on the division. And he said, "Take those things off of there. It's water, for God's sake, And I remembered it was funny and all the things because he did a whole thing with it. But I remember thinking the mind that says we're equal here. We don't need to divide it up between chorus and that. But that's the way he was with everything. Very accessible, very down to earth. And yet he was Dick Van Dyke. He was, by the way, great in the show as the devil in Damn Yankees. It was a perfect role for him.
And he is now, I think, in his mid-90s. And our agent represents the Dick Van Dyke Foundation, so our agent's with him a lot. And I got a text from my agent the other day, and our agent's holding a ukulele. He's been taking ukulele lessons with Dick. Yes. That's the sort of guy he is, where he's constantly trying new things, and he's totally vital and exercising all the time, and he's really amazing.
He's totally alive.
Yeah.
you know. And I was just reading a book, a wonderful stage actress, well, all kinds of things, Cheetah Rivera, who did Bye Bye Birdie with Dick on Broadway, the original cast. And in it, she describes him the same way we're talking. She talked about how amazing he was then, and they met like X amount of years later, maybe 6 years ago. And she said he was still the same person with the same generosity and so forth. So we love you, Dick Van Dyke.
Along those same lines, has there been a moment, whether at these conventions, at a studio, on stage, where you saw another actor, another celebrity, a performer, Taylor Swift, where you absolutely fanboyed out, where you either couldn't speak or you said way too much?
Well, I could never not speak, so there's that. I always find something to say. Yeah, I remember going to one of the first things I did was a Hollywood con in LA, and it was all these people from television shows. And Patty Duke was growing up, I just loved the Patty Duke show. And there she was, and I was like, oh my God. I mean, there was lots of people, Florence Henderson, all the people from all the TV shows and everything, they were all there. And for me, again, I was there, of course, with Nightmare Before Christmas, but these were people that I thought, oh my God, they're real. I never would have thought I'd ever met them, Dick Van Dyke, all these different people. So I did fanboy out. I mean, I being in the business, I knew not to go to them and regurgitate on them, but I also tried to find the edited way of saying how much I appreciated, And I did, some years later, I did a production of Follies in LA with Patty Duke, and I got to really tell her how much, meeting her and seeing her had meant to me and so forth. Another lovely person, but yeah, I fanboyed out big time, big time.
It's interesting to me in a way, and I don't think it's about necessarily that I think of myself as being better than anybody else, that I don't tend to fan about actors as much as I do about people who do humanitarian work, the Mother Teresas of this world. I'm trying to think of specific people whom if I saw them, I would be literally on my knees going, because to me those are the real heroes, and there are often people that I meet who work in community service, for instance, who I am in awe of. Literally in awe of, because they dedicate their lives. There's a group called Doctors Without Borders, and they work in the worst possible conditions in war-torn countries, saving people's lives. Those are the people that I fanboy about.
And along those same lines, you and I are both friends with, absolutely. We're both friends with an individual named Omar at Give Kids the World in Florida. Are there other charities, are there other organizations that you tend to spend time giving to and giving considerations to?
My wife and I are really into groups that provide food. There's a group up where we live called Connecticut Food Share. There are organizations like this all over the country that are providing food and sustenance and sometimes shelter to people who just, are going through bad times or natural disasters or whatever. Those are the ones that I tend to gravitate toward.
Yeah, I give to many, but one I would single out to say, and it's sort of generic in a way, if that's even applicable, but St. Jude's.
Okay.
Yeah. Because what they do is apparent, and it's real, and it's always been the same, and it's absolutely vital to the people that they do it for. And I've known people who have benefited from what they do. And it's the one charity to me out of many that are very much deserving. It's the one that I always feel like I want to keep supporting because it's an ongoing thing, as are any of them really, but particularly because they deal with children. I think anything, the Native American funds that deal with young Native American children, African American children, African children to me, because they are in a position where they can't necessarily help themselves.
Right.
So they need the support from whomever can give it. And that's generally where I lend most of my support.
And there are also organizations that you can, like for instance, a number of Christmases ago, we decided that instead of giving gifts to everybody, because we have a very large kind of extended family, that we would start, there's an organization called Heifer, where you can literally just give $5, $10, or $15 towards buying a family a cow in a third world country so that they can support themselves with the milk or raising cattle. There's an organization called Finca that makes small micro loans to women so that they can start small businesses. All about entrepreneurial endeavors, but helping people help themselves. And there are ways of contributing, and so we do it every year now as a family where we send cards to everybody in the family saying, you now own a sheep. You just donated a sheep to so-and-so. We gave the money for the sheep, and it's in their name. And there's stuff like that that we all can do that are very valuable and help people everywhere.
Now, you mentioned family, and as you mentioned your children growing up. How did you find time to balance that healthy work-life balance, being on the road, filming, on the how did you find that time? Was it something that you baked into your contract, that you talked to the studios? Was it something that you gave to you told yourself, like, I just did this, now I'm going to take this time off?
When the kids are little, it's easy to travel. They're easier to travel. So my kids were always with me when I was on location doing stuff. But once they start school, I didn't mess with them because it's not fair. So I would be the one who would be traveling. This is why my daughter was saying, my dad's always looking for work. And that was really important to me as they were growing up. And I think everybody struggles, not just actors, everybody struggles with work-life balance, right? You all do at some point or another in your life. If you have a family, then you've got to deal with, I've got so many hours in the day, how do I spend time with my kids? How do I spend time with my spouse, my partner, whomever it is? And the important thing is to know that it's important to have two different parts of your life, that your work life isn't everything. No matter what it is you do and how dedicated you are to it, that if your loved ones are ignored, then you're in trouble in your life in general.
Yeah, balance, it really, when I think of the times when the question came up of do you do this or do you do that, that will get you this achievement in terms of your career. But if you take this path, you might get a little less, but you'll still have time to be in your life. And fortunately, I had family support in the thought of always be in your life, because if career went away, what do you got, right? And for me, even in the last few, maybe like 10, 15 years, the balance has shifted a little bit. It's about life more than it is about career. And I'm so glad through those years that I gave attention to my life, because I know other friends of mine who've had the same shift. They have no life. And it's sad because, you either play catch up or you try to build it out of nothing or something. But it's important to have it. But it's something you have to contribute to all along, I think. Not that you can't come to it at another point, but it helps to already have it there. And I think as a creative person, and that means anything, you want to have something that gives you a foundation to keep yourself going without that thing, that other thing. If you're a plumber, what if there's no more pipes? You know what I mean? You got to have something else going on. And I think for people in our business, particularly because we give in another kind of way, it's important to make sure that other part of your life is tended to. It's like a garden. If you don't water it, your plants don't grow, right? It's not enough just to have the garden. You have to put care into it.
So we only got a couple minutes left, so I want to talk about one very important thing, and that is your fans. How has interacting with your fans, over these past years, changed possibly your perspective on your characters, whether it is Nightmare, whether it's another movie? Has it changed the importance of that impact to you?
Well, I always talk about this whenever I'm in a group setting like this, because I don't know if you guys understand just how important it is to us that you're here. Both Ken and I work in the theater where we get a chance to interact with the audience, not necessarily on a personal basis like this where I can look at you and talk to you, but that even when you're on stage and playing a character, there is a relationship with the audience because the audience is constantly reacting, and you are in a way calibrating your performance to whatever is going on in the audience. And there's never an audience. People say to me, and I'm sure they've said to you, if you're in a long-running show, how do you do this over a year or 2 years? How do you do the same thing every night? It's not the same thing every night. But when you're doing movies and television, the only people you're interacting with are the people that you're in the movie with, right? And they're usually very interesting people, and it's a fun experience, and it's an interesting experience, it's an arduous experience, and it's very difficult in a lot of ways, but it's also very rewarding. But it's not rewarding from this exchange. And so what's changed for me is that coming to these events, it's one of the things. My wife, she's a wonderful person, but sometimes she begrudges the time that I spend doing these, right? And she says, yeah, well, and you're gone, and you like them. And I say yes, because it gives me a chance to understand what these things that I've done, and I'm not necessarily responsible for them, but that I've been part of them, and these things that I've done that I've been part of, and how much they mean to people in their lives, in their everyday lives, the movies that they watch all the time. I've had people say, whenever I'm in a bad mood, I go in and I watch X movie of yours. Well, it's not my movie, but it shows me that what we do, because I need to be, and I think Ken feels the same way. You can speak for yourself whenever you want to. That we all need to be in service to something. Right, in our lives. If we're not, if it's to our family, if it's to something outside the family, whatever. And this is a way of understanding how I'm of service in my life, which is really important.
People ask me, literally, they say, well, you do those Comic-Con things, but how do you do, what is that, how is that, what is that? And that's basically what I tell them. I said, but it gives me an opportunity to look in the faces of the people who find joy in what I've done, or what we've done, or what's done. That's different, and it gives you, I always tell them, I said, look, you don't understand. I come away with as much as they get.
Exactly.
Because I'm looking in your individual faces, and you're telling me what that project has meant to you and how much you enjoy it. It just came to my mind that we were in Austin years ago. I forget if you were there, but there had been the floods here. Remember a few years ago? There was this bad rain and floods and that. And this young lady came, and she seemed a little shaky, and I think she was with her mother. And make a long story short, her mother said that everything was destroyed. They lost their house, they lost everything in it, but she had already bought the ticket to come to the Comic-Con because she was a big Nightmare Before Christmas fan. She said, and she was literally speaking for her. She said she wasn't gonna come because of what's happened. And I told her, that's where you find joy, go there. And let them give you that, because the other is so tragic and so forth. I never forgot that, because I thought, who would have thought in the face of that kind of tragedy that somebody could come there, and that moment they were sharing with me or with us was going to give them some respite from something that overwhelming in their lives. And I remember thinking to myself, don't ever take it for granted what you might be providing for somebody. Yeah. Therefore, make sure you receive the joy they're giving you. and take it with you. And trust me, there have been times when I was very glad to get it. I'm always glad, but some specific times.
Absolutely, yeah. I just to add to that, there's a young woman who came to me once and said, you know, my mother was a drug addict. I can't talk about it. Anyway, we get a lot from this, guys.
Yeah.
Just know that we do.
And what we find out, i.e. a story like that or the woman, is that it means more to people than you think it does, than you could ever imagine. Because people are in their homes watching this now at this point, and they're having this relationship with your work, your energy, that you're not even there, but part of you is there. So when you come here and see us in person, it's like you're meeting us, but you've already met us, you know what I mean? And vice versa in some sort of way. So it's a really beautiful thing. We thank you, I'm sure.
Thank you.
All right, so you guys are going to go back to your tables. You have photo ops. Any last words for our great fans here in Austin, no matter where they're from?
Boo. That's my last word. Boo.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.